Hi guys, today I'm going to be reviewing The Vast of Night. This just came out yesterday on Amazon Prime, May 29th, and it is a mystery sci-fi fantasy film. I saw the previews for this and it looked super cool, so I was really excited to see it because it's set in the 1950s with kind of some reference to what's going on in space and aliens. So this film starts off like it were an episode of The Twilight Zone. They're calling it Paradox Theater, but it's clearly exactly like The Twilight Zone. It's given with like a Ron Sterling voiceover. And then we are introduced exactly into the movie. So it has this movie within a TV show kind of structure to it, which was interesting. And I'm a huge fan of The Twilight Zone. And so I was curious to see, what the choice is. Why did they do it like that? But it certainly has the kind of vibe and the nostalgia to Twilight Zone episode. We are introduced to this small fictional town, Cayunga, New Mexico, and it's set in the late 1950s. And this town is preparing for a high school basketball game. And we are introduced to a young radio DJ, Everett, who is played by Jake Horowitz. And later on, we're introduced to Faye Crocker, who is a 16-year-old telephone switchboard operator who works in the town, and that she is played by Sierra McCormick. So we start off with a very long. It's not exactly a wonder, but there's a few very long tracking shots with Everett coming into the gym, and he goes all the way throughout the gym, and so. We get to see a ton of this production design, and the world building in this film is pretty darn cool. It feels kind of like a tour guide through Americana in the 1950s. So in terms of nostalgia, this film is really bringing it, and it was really fun to see, how well done all the production design and the tone and the mood of this whole thing is. This was a first-time director, Andrew Patterson, and we follow Everett as he goes through trying to fix. There's an electrical problem with the gym, and then later on he has his shift as the DJ that night. And then Faye had just bought a recorder, and she was asking Everett if he could show her how to use this new audio recorder. So kind of getting into these themes of technology and the wonder of what technology would bring, this kind of nostalgic feel to the 1950s as we gaze off looking into the sky and wonder what possibilities are there in the future. And so this film is really kind of a lot about that wonder, and I think that's the fantasy element to this film, and the mystery of it is there's a lot of intrigue to it. So essentially this film goes on to Faye identifies a very strange sound on her telephone operating board, and then she calls over to the DJ to to ask for help. What is this sound about? And it's kind of an ominous kind of like a racket sound, kind of almost like there's like interference kind of going on, and he basically puts it on the radio to see if anyone has any information about this sound, and there happens to be a few callers calling in giving a little bit more information about this. So there were a few very impressive, very long takes. At one point we leave the telephone booth and we go all the way back to the gym. So this whole town is basically covered in very long takes. So very impressive camera work. However, my frustration with this film is that there were a lot of elements put together in this, and I just didn't feel like it really held together and really paid off with some of the elements that were being used. This has this kind of Orson Welles War of the Worlds type vibe to it, and in the 1950s, it makes me think of Hitchcock, and there was a lot of cinematic world building to it, but ultimately we're told this story mostly through dialogue. And at one point I'm kind of losing a little bit of interest in the very beginning because I'm not even able to clearly see these actors' faces. We're shot following their world, but I wasn't really brought in to the world through the framing of the cinematography. And I don't think that's necessarily the cinematographer's fault, because I think the lighting and the aspect and the mood of this was really spot on. But I would have liked to seen a lot more cinematic sequences. Ultimately, the mystery of this, there's not a ton of plot to this film, and it basically kind of unravels, and ultimately it does have this kind of nice world building to it, and there's kind of there's certain feels to this with a really beautiful musical score as well, but it just doesn't really seem to deliver as much as it kind of promised. And I don't think it really particularly, harkened back to the use of the Twilight Zone. So, I didn't get a chance to see exactly how much of a budget this was, but it seemed like enough of a budget to do something with, and the elements were all there. I just don't think it really pulled together to be much more than, a very cool tour guide through 1950s small town Americana. I'm going to give this one a C. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you saw anything that I missed, maybe. This was certainly, watchable, kind of a fun film. It's interesting that it was set up like a television show because it felt a little bit less cinematic. So wasn't exactly what I was hoping for with all of these elements put together. All right, guys, that's my review for The Vast of Night. I'm going to be coming with some more reviews very soon, and I'll talk to you guys later.